Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. I've just been getting stuck into this amazing new show, Masters of the Air. Maybe for people who aren't familiar with it, can you give us a bit of an intro? What can people expect from this new show?
It's a story about the 100th Bomb Group, who are a group of American airmen during the Second World War, and their bombing campaign of Nazi Germany in that period from 1943 to 45, where they flew a series of incredibly dangerous and horrific missions in an attempt to bomb Nazi Germany into submission, flying at 25,000 feet in freezing cold conditions, often with a lack of oxygen or potential to lose oxygen at any moment. So it's a story about those men and what they went through and the psychological, emotional, physical challenges that they faced. And then I suppose more broadly, it's a story about brotherhood and sacrifice and a story about real people. You know, these are all real people in history, and so it was our task as actors to try and do justice to those real people and those real stories. You know,
Must have felt like quite kind of a dream gig, and the fact that it also sort of fits in with these other series that have gone before, Band of Brothers, The Pacific, got people like Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg kind of producing. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about kind of that context that this fits into, and what was the appeal for you when you first got the option to kind of jump on board?
Yeah, it's So it's a part of they call it a companion series, don't they? Which is, the fact that you never hear that phrase hardly ever, it shows you how unique it is. It fits into these three series who are linked. They're linked in sort of subject and period, but they're not sort of continuous with each other. And I'd seen Band of Brothers. I mean, Band of Brothers growing up was probably, I think, the first series I ever watched end to end. I think it came out when I was about 10. And it's probably to date the series that I've watched most on repeat. I love it, and the Pacific as well. And so when I heard about this project, I think I heard it about a year in advance, and obviously I knew the names of the people involved. I remember my friend telling me, I was in America at the time, and my friend told me about it, and we were like, "This is what we want. You know, this is the one we want to be in." So when it took a year later, and I got the call from the agent saying that you had this tape. I think I was on a holiday in Wales at the time, and I cut short the holiday. I drove back to London. You know, I got a military haircut, I got the costume, I got all the things I needed, and I probably worked harder on that tape than any tape I've ever worked on before, and luckily it came off. Yeah, it was definitely one that I knew about in advance, and that I was pestering my agents about, and so yeah, it made it all the more gratifying when it finally, I got the part and got Blakely.
And tell us a bit about your character, and what kind of prep must go into to playing, in it's not only kind of a period piece, but also kind of the technicalities, I guess, of trying to embody someone who who's an air pilot, and perhaps the sort of historical context that it's playing out in. So where did you even begin with trying to prepare to play him?
He's described, Harry Crosby, who's the character that Anthony Boyle plays. He describes him in his book A Wing and a Prayer as the most GI of GIs. He was an incredibly disciplined and skilled pilot who was very well respected by his fellow men, and he used to lead. I mean, you asked about the history. Historically, he used to lead not just the group, which is roughly around 50 planes. I think it's 48 planes with all their crew. He used to not just lead those up into formation and then out into combat, but the entire wing. So different groups, a whole bunch of groups. So literally, he would be the lead pilot for potentially hundreds of aircraft, which is insane at the age of 24. I mean, even getting them up into formation, I don't know. I mean, I don't like to reverse around a corner, let alone. So I can't even understand how he would have gone about that. So yeah, he was very well disciplined, very well respected. I think also what I tried to bring across was the fact that he knew how to have a good time, and he got on well with his crew. So there were kind of two sides to him like that. And then in terms of what I did to prepare, fortunately there was an interview which his son conducted with him in the 1980s. So there I got a sense of his demeanor and his general kind of humor, his spirit. And then there's that book, A Wing and a Prayer. There's Donald Miller's book, Masters of the Air. And then we had the boot camp that we all did together, which was really useful just to learn all that there is to know about being on these planes. I mean, that's not something you can just pick up in an hour or two. It took hours and hours of us doing quite sort of academic lectures on what it was to be a member of this crew, and what an aileron is, and an altimeter, and where the flight speed dial is, and how to take a heading and move the yoke in an appropriate way. So there was all those kind of technical things, and then also thankfully which was, I guess, the aim of the boot camp to begin with. We sort of group cohesion was established as well, and we managed to create that kind of camaraderie that I think is needed for this kind of project. So yeah, there was quite a lot of prep work, but thankfully, because with these kind of shows, there's a lot to draw on. There's a lot of literature and films and references and photographs and all these kind of things. So yeah, all those kind of things make it very useful, very useful for an actor.
And I guess as well with shows like this, I mean, the production values are just so high. I mean, you kind of can totally compare it with cinema these days. I mean, it just looks so slick, so realistic. I mean, walking onto those sets, just even the costumes, that must really help as well to be able to sort of step into that other era and step into your character.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the scale of it was just so vast. Turning up to the place where they built the airbase, and they built the officers' mess, and they built the chapel, and they built the place where the cinema, and the place where you'd sleep, and not to mention the actual planes that they built, which were moving around on motors around the runway, and the control tower. It was astounding being on a set like that, and you had to make sure you weren't sort of overawed by it, and still were sort of relaxed and free enough to not become kind of crushed by the size of it, Yeah, and we had Colleen Atwood as our head of costume as well, and she's a master of her craft, and she put us all in these amazing uniforms and flight jackets and everything, which were tough at times, because especially the combat scenes, or all the scenes when you're in the cockpit, or whatever part you might have been playing. Perhaps you're a gunner, or you're a bombardier, or a navigator. You all have to wear these pretty cumbersome, pretty heavy garments. And, obviously in reality, you're not 25,000 feet up in the air in the freezing cold. You're 20 feet up in the air, and you're surrounded by LED screens on all sides. And so it got pretty warm there, especially because you're up there for hours at a time, because it took you so long to get up to the rig. They couldn't just keep on bringing you up and back and forth, so you were stuck there in pretty sweltering conditions for quite a lot of the time. It was definitely helpful having that whole world built for you with such detail and so comprehensively. Definitely made it a lot easier walking on set. So that was a real privilege.
And I guess it was like not quite as extreme. I remember I was talking to the guys about Top Gun. I think Tom Cruise actually made them film while flying a plane. So at least you're only having to pretend. But it does look, the conditions are extreme. And I guess it makes it feel quite realistic, because it probably was so cumbersome, wearing all those costumes, the masks, everything. Were there any particular scenes that were really difficult that you remember? On the flip side, did you have a real highlight on set?
Yeah, thankfully, I didn't actually have to fly a real plane. I think I'll leave that to Tom Cruise. Those scenes in the cockpit that I was describing, those were the difficult ones, because you were sent into a kind of a delirious state up there, being up there for so long. I tell you what you'd say a highlight. I remember because you were stuck up there for so long, we would try and pass the time, just chatting. I remember we used to tell riddles to each other to pass the time. And one of those riddles, I think, has made it into the cut. So kind of what was happening between the takes. has ended up in it, which I like it when that happens, when something kind of organically finds its way in, for something that was just happening on the day. I guess that's a highlight. Yeah.
And yeah, you're saying at the beginning, kind of that feeling of camaraderie, which is obviously, what you have to portray as your characters, but I guess also, emerged between you as fellow actors. And it's, I mean, quite the cast list, with Austin Butler and Barry Keoghan, Callum Turner. What was it like working with all these amazing actors? And was there like did you almost become a bit of a family, I guess, by the end of shooting the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean that was the fortunate thing because of the boot camp. They did. I mean, you mentioned Austin and Callum. They did want to maintain, because they were senior officers. They did want to maintain some kind of distance, and there were sort of small things they did to maintain that, which was important. They couldn't just completely be sort of on your level. You're sort of like just another guy. But because we'd all been through that process together, we were all going through the same thing and the same experience. So that really helped develop that kind of shared experience and that cohesion, which I think's come across on the screen. So and that was something that Dale Dye, our military advisor, impressed upon us that was so vital, was to what he described as the crew glue, is what he described that as. And it was making sure that especially within your crew, within your aircraft, you found that sort of special bond between those individuals, because that historically, that's what kept them going, was not wanting to let that guy down next to you, more so perhaps than ideas of blind patriotism or whatever. I think it was more immediate than that, the kind of motivating factor.
And I was thinking, quite a multinational cast, quite a lot of Brits in there. How do you all work on the accents? Is it, do you have like dialect coaches and stuff? Do you stay in accent when you're on set? How does that all work?
We had dialect coaches, yeah. We had some great dialect coaches, and I fortunately had actual video of my guy speaking, so I could put on that. And yeah, some people stayed in accent, some people didn't. I find it easier to sort of go halfway house like that. I kind of, when I'm offset, I don't stay in accent, but in between takes, I will, just rather than just kind of coming in and out, in and out. I feel it's easier just in between takes to stay in, but and in between setups maybe, but no, I tend to, when I go home, to return to my normal ways of speaking. I find that a better approach. Otherwise, I think, I would send myself a bit crazy, not to mention anyone else that I come into contact with, any other friends, And
in terms of the takeaways from the show, I mean, like we said, it's such incredible production values. It's really one of those series that you just get so sucked into. But it isn't just your sort of classic, I guess, kind of war show either. It really does try to delve into the emotional strain that it took on these soldiers, kind of, what might be challenging about it, not just kind of showing things in the air, but also, their lives down on the ground. So what do you think people can take away from watching it?
Yeah, I think that's the wonderful thing about this series, perhaps in contrast to the Pacific and Band of Brothers, is but by virtue of the fact that they are airmen, they had this off time, I think that might be both a welcome relief for the audiences at times, that it's not just end-to-end combat, that there is this downtime, and there are moments to explore more emotional, more occasionally romantic, more interior kind of storylines. And I think that was important because these guys, it was a special level of, a special kind of psychological strain they were under, where they were going from incredibly intense combat for hours and hours and hours, with flying over to Europe, flying back. They could be in planes where a whole bunch of their crew and their friends have been killed, but they have to continue flying, and then they fly back, and then they're in the pub that evening, or they're on a date with someone in central London that night, having to deal with the sort of discombobulation of that, while also knowing that they're having their time off, but they're going to be going back up there and back into that kind of relentless experience, and knowing that they're going to have to do it that continuously till they complete however many missions or however long the war is going to be. And so I think it was really important that particular kind of psychological strain was analyzed, because that's perhaps not been something which has been under the microscope, at least for a while, and certainly not in a series of such scope and length.
And looking back, some of the other roles that you've done, I guess before this one, so many different things from Doctor Who, that amazing episode in the last season of Black Mirror. What have been some of the highlights for you so far?
Yeah, that last episode of Black Mirror, that was really fun. It's fun, like this show, it's fun and exciting to work on projects where the writing is just so good and the team involved is so good. And even before you turn up to set, the pedigree of those individuals and what you see before you on the page is such that you take a huge amount of confidence. I think I've learned more and more that having that trust and that confidence is really important, because as soon as some of that starts to fade, that's when you feel a little more disorientated and detached, and that's lack of confidence can lead to you closing up and perhaps not taking the risks and having the freedom that you would to create the best work that you can. So yeah, that Black Mirror episode, like this show, was a great experience.
And it definitely seems like, I know you came sort of like from theatre, but each of the roles you've done so far are really so contrasting, kind of when you look at them back to back, if you like. Even that conservative politician and the accent that you had on in that in comparison to the role you had in Doctor Who. So is that something that you really relish, I guess, to kind of like have quite a transformation and play someone very different from yourself?
Yeah, accents are things I like to play around with. I find the voice is quite an important aspect for me, and I'm sort of approaching the external kind of outside elements of the character. I find the voice very helpful. So yeah, I like playing around with accents, and that Derby one from, well, it was a kind of particular kind of Derbyshire accent I was trying to apply for that one. But yeah, any role I take, I'm always thinking about the voice, and I'm almost slightly reticent or embarrassed to kind of say that, because I think often you should be talking about the kind of interior work and the motivations and whatnot, and it feels slightly more kind of external or superficial. But I don't know, I don't care. For me, the voice is really, really crucial.
In terms of what you're going to be doing next, you already have your next job lined up, and what might be kind of on your bucket list, of things you'd have to try, maybe different genres, maybe more stage or
Yeah, well, stage I'd love to do at some point. I'm not sure whether wants to be that I want to do it next, but I love the theatre, and I definitely want to return to it at some point soon. I'm not sure I can speak about it, but I just did this detective series that I shot in Amsterdam, but I don't think I can say much more about that. And then in terms of what I want to do next, I think I want to do some comedy next. It's been a while since I've done something out and out that's kind of out and out comedic, and that's kind of an itch that I feel I kind of want to scratch. So yeah, anything of that kind of bent is something I'll be looking out for next.
And I do think, I mean, yeah, I saw you in another interview talking about, kind of the strength of like British TV and film. And it does seem, like the comedic slant that we get on things, it's something that just always seems to work well, even when it's ostensibly in an American show like Succession. So is that something you would love to, work on a show like that, I suppose?
Oh my God, are you joking? Of course, yeah. I'd love to work on Succession, Who wouldn't? Yeah, I mean, that's like top work. Unfortunately, I don't think there's going to be much chance of me working on that show anytime soon. I think that's done. But yeah, anything that Jesse Armstrong might be doing, I'd love to be involved. Yeah, I mean, that show, the writing is just, I mean, what's clever about that show is it's not simply an out and out comedy. It moves so deftly between comedy and drama in its own way. So yeah, I mean, but sure, I mean, that's a show like that would be something I'd love to aim for next.
Any directors or other actors that you'd have on your list that you'd love to work next to?
I mean, what if I have a blank check? I Luca Guadagnino, the Safdie brothers, Andrea Arnold, Shane Meadows, so many directors I'd love to work with. That's what I think success is. If you want to sort of define it, as the ability and the freedom to be able to work with those kind of individuals. So my mission currently is trying to build myself up to that stage where I can, but that's more within the rounds of sort of possibility of doing next. And that's those are the names of some, but I mean, there are so many more, you know. I have the premiere. We just had the premiere in LA last week, which went really well. We only watched the first episode, so that's all I've seen so far. We have a screening here in London next week on Monday.
Amazing. Well, yeah, and I guess that's the other thing, when a lot of it probably is added in afterwards, in terms, especially the sort of the scenes up in the air. What's it like seeing the finished product? Is it exactly how you imagined, or is it any different?
I mean, it's astounding. I mean, what was we on the day we shot in volume, so on the screen you would kind of see something which sort of approximated what the audience ends up seeing, which is very useful as an actor. But yeah, I saw it in LA. I just saw the combat scenes, those scenes in the air. It looks incredible, you know, especially. And that's the only sad aspect is we were watching it on a big screen, and it'd be amazing if more people could see it on a big screen because it has such kind of grandeur, I suppose, to those shots. And but yeah, it looks incredible. As you say, it doesn't look like television, you know. It looks like a proper film. So yeah, I'm excited for people to see those scenes because it's an ambitious thing to do, you know, shooting a series like that with so much combat in the air. It's you know, it's not simply, it's not a show about the infantry or even about or about tanks or whatever. It's quite an incredible thing to be able to depict that kind of combat in a convincing and an appropriate way. And so yeah, I'm very excited for people to see those scenes in particular.
And I think the other thing that just struck me is, you know, perhaps there is a sense of nostalgia about that era. And of course, even though it is, you know, very grueling and, you know, is depicting war, perhaps people feel like they were simpler times in some respects in comparison to what we're living through now. So maybe in that sense, there's also an allure in that respect.
Yeah, I think there'll be a kind of a nostalgic element to it. I think that probably will come more through the fact that they're airmen, and in particular bombers. In that period, that was considered quite a sort of a glamorous thing to do. And you had Jimmy Stewart and you had Clark Gable, who were bomber boys. And so that's why I think it's quite clever that they've cast the likes of Austin, for instance, because it was quite a glamorous thing to do. And needless to say, Austin Butler's quite a glamorous guy. And so it kind of fits with it. And, you know, that's, and also by virtue of the fact they were airmen, that enabled them to kind of keep themselves sort of well put together. And so there'll be that kind of sheen to it at times in amongst all the kind of horrific elements and the battles and the combat. There'll be that kind of, yeah, as you say, a sort of nostalgia to it, and the music, you know, and the way they would dance and whatnot. So yeah, I doubt that there will be much nostalgia for the sort of more horrific combat scenes, of course, but like, you know, with regards to everything else and that period, I think yeah, there will be that aspect.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much. It's been so lovely to chat to you, and really enjoy the screening next week. Thanks so much.
All right, then. Thank you very much for meeting with me. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye. Bye.